Europeanness for her seemed to not reside in any particular place, although I have to say that's her official idea of cosmopolitanism. However, as I'm about to show you, I think there's an intense geopolitical precondition for thinking. So there's an unacknowledged or an unnamed territorial commitment that she makes in her effort to delimit what she calls thinking. That's my initial way of answering that question. Yes.
I think it's a very interesting question. I don't actually know too much of Arendt's work, in all honesty, but I have read a little bit from the New York Times in response to kind of polemic that she received about an article that she wrote on the Nuremberg trial.
Yes.
And I think what characterized that response was precisely this kind of question, but in relation to authority. How does the territorialization of authoritative thought affect the thought of those who are subsumed under it in a certain way? Yeah.
She has a huge amount to say about authority. It's interesting. But what she's actually moving toward, and it may be that what you actually read.
It was online and
yeah.
after a while.
Yeah, it may actually be the polemics around the Eichmann trial.
Yeah, Eichmann trial.
Yeah, which we'll actually look at, because she did call into question whether the Israeli courts had the authority to try him and to sentence him to death. She thought he ought to be tried. And she even waffles in the book. If we get a chance to read it carefully, we'll take a look. But in the end, she didn't think that an international crime should be tried by a nation. And she had some questions about whether Israel could both represent the victims and be the judge. And she thought there were inadequate international tribunals operating. But in fact, the polemic throughout the Eichmann trial is a polemic that seeks to upend sovereignty, to call into question the authority of the nation state, and to move toward a post-sovereign conception of law. So maybe we will get there. I'm gonna get back to actually all of these questions in a moment. So, okay. So when she briefly thought the Jews as a kind of nation would fight alongside the French, meaning the non-collaborationist French, the Dutch, the non-collaborationist Dutch, the Italians, the non-fascist Italians, and so on, it was somewhat remarkable that she was willing to see the Jewish people as a nation, or at least as a people, and even as a European nation. She's trying to elaborate a notion of international resistance through cooperative and federative organizations that was neither Marxist nor individualist. Okay, so it's in an interesting way post-liberal, and in another way not Marxist. And it's one of the reasons she drives everybody mad. Is she on the right? Is she on the left? You know, where is she? But I think that let's note, at least here, federations, international cooperations, as ways of trying to think politically, what does it mean being with, Mitsein? And also, what does it mean that a life with others turns out to be not only essential to who one is, but essential to the task of thinking, what it is to think, what it is to judge, and even what it is to live. Okay, so these are all kind of forms of sociality or being with that are going to turn out to have some rather important philosophical consequences for her view. Well, let's turn to the Eurocentrism, since that is indeed the geopolitical presumption of this sociality, right? Sounds good, plurality, sociality, federations, and yet, what does it mean that it's always European or that it's presumptively European? I think, like Cohen, Arendt embraced Jewishness as a European mode of belonging, even a European people. Cohen accepts the German nation, thinks this is the best place for Jews to reside and to receive protection. Arendt accepts the Jews as a nation, but they only make sense as a nation if they are a European nation, and this will be a position that establishes distance from that form of the Zionist movement, political Zionism, that sought to establish a Jewish nation in the land of Palestine and on the lands of the Palestinians. Okay. So on the one hand, here's Arendt, a great critic of political Zionism, made very, very strong claims against Jewish sovereignty and the Jewish nation state by the late 40s, very clearly, and in 46, 47, developed a binational alternative to Ben-Gurion's political Zionism. At the same time, her anti-political Zionism is actually based, at least in part, on a notion that Jews should not be in the Middle East, that they belong in Europe, right? So there's a Eurocentrism that, oddly enough, supports this anti-Zionism. Now, there's a Eurocentrism that supports Zionism, too. It just didn't happen to be hers. So, both Arendt and Cohen seek to restrict the idea of Jewishness to what is European, and this becomes a way of denying the existence, or at least the importance, of non-European Jewish traditions. The Mizrahim, who are Jews from mainly Arab lands or Arab language or Arab traditions, Arab Jews. The Sephardim, from Spain originally, or North Africa, descended from the Inquisition in the late 15th century. The Inquisition which demanded that the Jews of Spain either convert or flee. So the Sephardim then were distributed throughout Europe and North Africa. Arendt's language is sometimes brutal in this regard. For instance, in a letter written to the philosopher Karl Jaspers in 1961, during the Eichmann trial, she developed a quite arrogant and racist typology of what she saw. Here I quote to you. "My first impression, on top the judges, the best of German Jewry. Below them, the persecuting attorneys, Galicians, but still Europeans." Okay, so she's come to Israel, right? You have to remember. She's now, 1961, an established New Yorker. She is writing for the New Yorker magazine. She's covering the Eichmann trial. She arrives in Israel. What does she see? She writes to her friend Karl Jaspers, German philosopher in Heidelberg. "Everything is organized by a police force that gives me the creeps, speaks only Hebrew and looks Arabic. Some downright brutal types among them. They would follow any order." They would follow any order, she says, which is, of course, quite astonishing, since that is what she claims about Eichmann. Okay, so she's looking at the Israeli court system and police. She says they would follow any order. And then she says, "And outside the Oriental mob, as if one were in Istanbul or some other half-Asiatic country. In addition, and very visible in Jerusalem, the Payas and the Kaftan Jews, who make life impossible for all the reasonable people here." Okay, so here we have it. The reasonable people are clearly the people of clear European descent who are holding on to this tradition of reason. Okay, so that's pretty brutal. And it's difficult. It's paradoxical.